Hi, you beautiful New Zealanders. Well, we're in this series on the letter by 440 church leaders to the government trying to stop David Seymour's bill, and this is part 4 that we're going to do today. So if you haven't seen the other parts, I suggest you do that, and so that you can get up to speed with parts 1, 2, and 3, and then join in with where we're at today. So I'm just going to fire up right where we finished last time. Most Kiwis think wrongly that activist Maori can't get their hands on private property, but this is not so. Don't be fooled. Local councils in collaboration with iwi and woke bureaucrats can reclassify anyone's land any time. Following are just some of the classifications iwi and councils have come up with as a first step to getting their hands on private land. Now here are some of the classifications that they've come up with. The RMA, that's the Resource Management Act, Section 6, notes the following: outstanding natural landscapes, outstanding natural features, significant natural features, scenic rural landscapes, rural scenic sites and significance to Maori, significant natural areas, wahi tapu, that's sacred Maori land. Now, I'm speaking from personal first-hand experience here. I received notification from Heritage New Zealand that my land was going to be reclassified as wahi tapu, sacred Maori land. The story they came up with as to why it is sacred was found to be just made up. It was absolute BS. The upshot is that I have to keep paying the rates, but Maori can walk all over my land. If I want to develop the land in any way, I have to get iwi permission. Now, most landowners, when confronted with this kind of corruption, this kind of crap, you want to call it that, and it is, sell for a song to get out, and Maori move in to buy it. It's a carefully worked strategy for Maori to get possession of private land at bargain basement prices. So they don't actually steal your land, but they get it through corrupt means, and that's what they're doing. The law currently says that private land cannot be awarded to Maori, only state-owned land. So bureaucrats and activists are working around the law. How do they do this? How they are having a go at getting my land is just one example. So what's another example? The government buys farms and large blocks of land when they come up for sale, or surplus state-owned land is land banked. Either way, this land is then gifted to Maori in a settlement arrangement. Remember when the government purchased Ihumato in the middle of Auckland from Fletcher's for $30 million? And most of that land eventually was gifted to Maori. See how they do it? You know what? There's a double tragedy here. First, we the taxpayer paid for the land being given to Maori. That is to say, the government is using our money to buy the land, then they give it away. Second, it has to be said, Dr. John Robinson rightly asserts that all settlements are based on fraud and ought not to be happening. Remember his quote? He said, all treaty settlements are based on the Crown having broken the treaty. Since that is not so, i.e. the Crown have not broken the treaty, all such settlements are a fraud. There is no justification for the continued existence of either settlements or the Waitangi Tribunal. That's John Robinson, and he's 100% right. Another example of the fraud and corruption going on in the background of New Zealand, you see, when I say the background of New Zealand, there's a lot of things happening in New Zealand and nobody else knows about. The media won't report on it because it's not in their interest to do that. They're under the spell of the Public Interest Journalism Fund, and so they're working in tandem with the activists, and they won't tell you what's going on in New Zealand in the background until it hits you, and then suddenly you're it. You have first-hand experience. Well, here's an example of just one incident that happened that actually did make it to the paper, so it's worth talking about this. The government signed off on a deal with Maori in the South Island for Maori to build and own new police stations, which they would then lease back to the government, all because Police Commissioner Costa said, quote, this was a step towards a new model of practical partnership. Well, I say this should never have happened. Costa is unaware that the treaty is not a partnership. What should have happened? The contract for the building of new police stations ought to have been put out to tender so that the other 159 cultures could have equal opportunity to win the contract. Shouldn't that be right? Wouldn't that be the right thing to do? Only an apartheid state would have allowed Maori special right like this. The 440 church leaders want to keep this corruption going. Really? Their behavior is just shameful. So how does this relate to David Seymour's bill? David's second principle, before it was amended that is, was as follows: the New Zealand government will honour all New Zealanders in the chieftainship of their land and all their property. David is trying to stop all the corruption going on in the background of New Zealand, where private land and publicly owned land property is being targeted by activists. Yet astonishingly, unbelievably, the 440 church leaders oppose David trying to stop this. They appear to support racism, this is the 440 church leaders, separatism, apartheid and corruption. David wants to put the sword to all the legislation and laws which have been passed which will allow activist Maori corruption over private property rights. It is a fundamental right in a modern democracy that all citizens in a country can feel 100% secure with respect to the ownership and control of their private property. And at the moment, the way it is, with what's going on in the background in New Zealand with activist Maori, nobody's property is secure, and this is an absolute disaster. Yet the 440 church leaders support it. Can you believe it? How does this relate to the 440 church leaders? As I've just said, these leaders are corrupt in that they want to keep the laws and legislation in place which allow Maori to threaten private property rights. Yep, that's what they're doing. So here's the next statement from the 440 church leaders. We support Te Tiriti o Waitangi and oppose the proposed treaty principles bill. As Christian leaders from across Aotearoa, New Zealand, we express our commitment to Te Tiriti o Waitangi. We affirm that Te Tiriti o Waitangi protects the tino rangatira of Hapu and Iwi. In the final draft, Article 2, Sentence 1, the word possession was translated as tino rangatira in Maori. Activists have said that this means unqualified exercise of chieftainship. Well, it doesn't mean that. It just means possession. But setting aside their twisted mistranslation, I think there is no problem with the activist translation. Why? We can beat them at their own game. How? Well, think about it. In 2024, if someone, Maori or non-Maori, owns a piece of land with a house on that land and chattels, we could say that they are the chiefs of that land, that house, and those chattels. In other words, all Kiwis who own land, house, and property and chattels are the chiefs over their assets. Is that not true or not? Well, it ought to be true. Maori want to make it sound as though being chiefs over assets is distinctly a Maori concept. It is not. It's common to all New Zealanders who own property. Article 2 says so. Notice, quote, the article actually says all the people of New Zealand in this article. The Queen confirms and guarantees to the chiefs and the tribes and to all the people of New Zealand the possession, that's tino rangatiratanga, of their land, dwellings and property. And then the Christian leaders go on to say this, that rangatiratanga over land and taonga is to be upheld. That's just what we're saying. It's what David Seymour is saying in his second principle before it was amended, you blonkers. Here the word taonga pops up again. I have already talked about this. As I said earlier, activists mistranslated this word to mean treasures, meaning anything Maori treasure. We ought not to be concerned about this mistranslation either. Why? We can beat them at their own game. The treaty clearly mandates that all New Zealanders should have the rangatiratanga, that is, be chiefs over their land and property, taonga or treasures. Again, think about it. The jet ski or boat or caravan or jewellery or car or whatever which is owned by non-Maori, a private citizen, which is valuable to them, is their treasure. Is that not true? All of us on our properties have what we deem as to be treasures. Once again, Maori want to make it sound as though the word taonga is distinctly a Maori concept. It is not. What am I saying? I'm saying that all New Zealanders have taonga, that's treasures, personal property, which is valuable to them. Is that not true or not? What does this have to do with David Seymour, his bill, and the 440 church leaders? David's bill wants to acknowledge that all New Zealanders who own land, dwellings, and property, their treasures, ought to be able to rest, that is, to be secure, knowing that the New Zealand government will honour all New Zealanders in the chieftainship of their land and all their property, all their treasure. So why are activists arguing with that? Who knows? They just want to keep the gravy train going. Notice David uses the word all in his principle. This means all the people of New Zealand, not just Maori, period. Church leaders want to oppose David's principle, David Seymour's second principle before it was amended. They give no reason, which is just appalling. Well, that's 10 minutes worth today. We'll do another one tomorrow. But what I want you to get out of it today is that David's second principle before it was amended applied to private property rights for all New Zealanders, both Maori and non-Maori, and it synchronizes beautifully with Article 2 of the treaty. It's faithful to the treaty and it should be accepted. So let's fight for that principle and see it become law. All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Please share this video with everyone everywhere. The mainstream media should be reporting on the issues I am raising in these videos, but they're not. Why aren't they? Well, they're corrupt. Why are they corrupt? They are collaborating with Maori activists, there's no doubt about that. In the final analysis, the people of New Zealand, that's us, have ultimate power, not the politicians. Did you know that? The people can kick out the people in power and they can put them into power. How are we going to do that? Well, awareness is the key to change. If enough people in New Zealand become aware of the issues I am raising, we can save this beautiful country. So share these videos everywhere so that come the next election, we can vote the right people in and kick out the people who are destroying New Zealand.